Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. So in this video, I have a little something I'd like to say about fuel efficiency in the forge, and I hope to take and share some tips to you beginners out there and even some of you intermediate and advanced smiths for running a very fuel efficient fire. So in this shop, I have many forms to heat my material up. I have torches, I have the larger version of torches, which are gas forges. I have them in multiple sizes, 3 burners, single burners, double burners. I have a lot of different ways of heating material. My favorite way of heating material though so far is what I got my start with, which is a coal forge. Now I'm running coke in this forge right now, and as you can see, the fire is pretty low. So that brings me to the topic at hand, is how to run your forge fire efficiently. Now we're going to be talking about solid fuel forges today. We're not going to be talking about gas forges, because that's a more complex issue on how those are designed in order for them to run for efficiency's sake. So let's talk about the solid fuel forges for a second. Solid fuel forges can be the most economical forge that money can buy as far as run time. And as far as I'm concerned, even across the whole nation of the great USA, I would say they are still pounds for pennies, way more efficient as far as cost efficient than a gas forge. And only the reason for that being is if you have to go out and buy your LP gas from a place, you have to go drive to it, you have to exchange the tanks, right? Things like that. Again, design considerations when it comes to propane forges on their varying degrees of efficiency. I would say that a solid fuel forge, being able to buy a ton of coke if you're possible, or 1 ton of coal at a time, again, if this is possible for you and you don't live in suburbia, I would say that this is probably the most fuel efficient and cheapest way to go as a blacksmith. So let's talk about how we make it efficient. What I want you guys to do is I want you to look at this forge. So I've got the forge all set up here, okay? And I have a small piece of 1/4 inch square, it might be just a little proud, a 1/4 inch square bar stock. And you can see the fire is fairly low right now, okay? The fire is low in a coke forge, and it tends to die out fairly quickly in a coke forge if you don't keep a constant air blast. So I'm gonna go ahead and step on this air blast here real quick, and I'm going to bring the nucleus of this fire up to the temperature, the forging temperature that I want the steel to get to. So again, this is cold. I haven't done anything with this. It's a cold piece of steel, but we're gonna let this heat up to the temperature, or to the forging temperature that we are after. So we're gonna let that heat up to the forging temperature that we are after, and then we're gonna insert that piece of 1/4 inch material right into that hot nucleus of that fire. And the reason why I'm using such a small piece of stock is I want to show you how the conduction of heat onto that material, how it absorbs the heat of the fire very quickly, can help save you some dollars when you're running a solid fuel forge. So as you can see, it's really starting to get quite hot now, up to that forging temperature. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the air blast off. That's the key here. I'm going to cut the air blast off and stick this just straight in the hottest portion of the fire. So there it goes. I'm going to go and cut the air blast off. And you'll see how this ends up wicking into the piece. Christ-Centered Ironworks is sponsored by Blacksmithsupply.com and viewers like you. Be sure to check out Blacksmithsupply.com for all your forging needs. Now back to the video. So we'll let that set for a minute while I grab a pair of tongs to be able to grab it here. Let that set for a second. Grab me a good pair of tongs. Let me look at it here. Good. 5/16, I guess. We'll just use those. That should work out all right. So here's the first big tip, and this is the whole reason, thinking, whoops, hit the air blast again. This is my whole reason for this video. If you've noticed, I've brought the fire up to temperature, And now I'm letting the metal heat up without any more air. And the reason for that being is just like in a campfire, right, where you've got the coals in a campfire, if you blow on those coals of the campfire, they start consuming up very quickly. Now they get hot, which is good, that's what you want, right? But they also get consumed a lot quicker the more airflow you add to them. So there's your first key of keeping a very fuel efficient fire, is only get the fire up to the temp where you want the steel to get, and then cut off or cut back your airflow once you start achieving that temperature inside the fire. Not on the steel, but inside the fire. So now let's look at this piece here. And again, I haven't been hitting the airflow. That piece is right up to forging temperature, right? There's no more air going into the fire pot, but that piece is up to forging temperature. Now I will flip that around, assuming that we went over to the anvil and we worked this down to cold. I'm going to stick the other end of the bar in this fire once I bring it up to forging temperature again. So we'll get on the air blast. So we'll just go ahead and get up on this air blast real quick. Bring the fire back up to that forging temperature that we're after on our steel. And then we're going to stick that steel back in the fire once we get there. Adding more air once the fire is hot is doing nothing for you except consuming fuel. So the only reason to add more air into the fire of a forge is to bring up the temperature of that forge. Any excess air is just going to producing scale on your piece once it reaches a temperature in which the steel will scale up. So heat time is the same regardless. The steel can only conduct away from the fire, absorb as much heat as it can at a steady rate. There's only a certain amount of heat that it can take in, and adding more air to the situation doesn't get it there any quicker. So you bring your fire up to a nice bright heat, and then you put your steel in, and if that steel's cold, it's going to absorb that heat. If it's hot, if it's anywhere cooler than what the temperature of the fire is, it is going to absorb the heat into itself until it becomes the same temperature, or it reaches a state of, being equal with the fire. So I'll pull this bit of steel right back out, and as you can see, it's back up to a forging temperature. No air whatsoever, it's gotten up to the forging temperature. Now I will talk briefly about gas forges to make them just a little bit more efficient while running them. If you have a gas forge, I find it incredibly important to have gas shutoffs. One, not only for safety if something goes down, but also to make your forge run a little bit more efficient. Let's take a look at this here. As you can see on this big forge, this Mankel gas forge, I have 3 shutoff valves. So if I'm doing a run, right? If I need to go over to the other side of the shop and I don't have anything heating at the moment, I will go in and I will shut off those valves, kill the gas that's going into the forge, go do whatever I have to do on the other side of the shop, come back, maybe it's 5-10 minutes later, I come back, I open those valves, the inside of that forge is still screaming hot and is able to ignite the gas, and boom, it's on again. Almost like a torch or a fuel saver on a rosebud or a torch of some sort. So hopefully this little video will help you all out there save some fuel. It's really not too difficult to do. You just got to keep in mind the physics that are at play in the forge and apply those when you're in the shop. One last thing I'll say about solid fuel forges: tamping down or watering down the outside edges of your fire so your fire doesn't spread too big is a huge help in keeping unnecessary fuel from burning while you're burning the fuel that is needed to heat the piece of material. So that's it. That's my final a little bit there. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully it helped some of you out there. If it did, drop a comment down in the comment section down below. God bless each and every last one of you, and thank you to all the channel members that make this content possible. Take care and happy forging.